Okay. All right. Jeez. Okay. Let's call the meeting to order at 2 o'clock. All righty, very good. Are there any committee or public comments? Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 3. IWV Groundwater Authority. Director Rotora.
I knew you'd get to that.
Yep.
Thank you. July 14th GA meeting was actually a very light agenda, and I think Don already put in his report the two notable things that happened. One is that the 2020 audit was commissioned, and that's 7 months after the year began. And at the end of the meeting, the second thing is GA chairman requested the staff to investigate reducing water district fees. That is, didn't request our staff to do that. He requested the GA staff to do that. So that's going to be interesting at the next meeting. Basically, the GA has two fundamental recurring problems. The first, of course, is the financial organization that we've talked about for 4 years. At this last meeting, the new general manager, who's employed by the regional government services, indicated they cannot complete the transition of the financial aspects of the GA because they can't get the data from the county that they need to transition. And it's been 5 or 6 months. So this is an obvious problem, but no corrective action was taken. Also, at the last meeting, the financial report showed that the fund for the replenishment fee is in the red. The water district, of course, has contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars. And no state water project entitlement has been purchased, but nobody seems to know where the money's gone. So that's something that we need to follow up on and hopefully don't have to do anything about. But we can't just let it go on.
Right, that's a little alarming.
The second fundamental problem is outreach to the community. It's obviously been complicated by COVID, but neither the PAC nor the TAC has met for over a year. There are, however, 2 projects coming up, both the recycled water project and the shallow well mitigation project, that lend themselves to both the input from the TAC and the PAC. And I'm hoping that we can use that to regenerate the public outreach. Basically, the GA needs to rebuild public trust. The one positive note is that the GA will be considering modifying the process to issue discussion items to the PAC. Right now, it takes pretty much congressional authority to get the PAC to actually review something. And I hope we can eliminate some of the roadblocks to getting the PAC involved in some of these items. We're wasting a lot of talent. And we've been told that there should be meetings by both the TAC and the PAC before the next meeting. So we'll see how that goes. So that's it for the GA meeting. Thank you.
All right. So, Department of Water Resources, well, that's not GA really, but there was a letter from the Department of Water Resources recently to all the major players in the groundwater excitement of recent date, and you've read that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Also, I see.
Yes, there, and basically, I think the last paragraph I thought was very interesting, and it says that it was hoping that all of the agencies would re-engage to work together to formulate a solution. not exactly sure how that's going to work. But obviously, we're hoping that the adjudication will kind of direct us into that direction as well. So I guess that's a wait and see.
So one of the lines in the letter was, in light of the recent filing by the Water District for adjudication, they felt that they needed to issue this letter. And I want to know, did you feel that they were offering services as mediators?
It's hard to say exactly. The state has offered help in the past. I haven't actually seen them do anything. They do have grants, which are good, but, in my mind, there's still, the water in California is a major problem. It's not just a local problem. And I have yet to see the state of California actually be very proactive in terms of getting more water, south of the north border.
Okay.
I keep thinking that it's got to happen. It's got to happen. I think the federal legislature is pushing California to do something. I haven't actually heard of any proactive measures on the part of California to do anything, like build new reservoirs or new aqueducts or anything like that.
Okay. So when I read the letter from the DWR, I got the impression that they would prefer that the whole issue be mediated, and I thought that they were offering their services to help with that. I note that Mojave Pistachios immediately responded with an email back saying that they fully accepted that offer from the state. So I'm curious if you could listen carefully for any references when you're at the next GA meetings to that letter.
Oh, sure.
What you can pass to us, you can. What you cannot, you cannot. But I'm
Right.
interested to know how that fell on that organization.
Right. Well, Mojave Pistachios has been saying now for 3 years they want to cooperate and work with us. And we actually, the GA actually kicked the Mojave Pistachios off the PAC and the TAC, I believe, for a short period of time.
Briefly, yes.
Briefly. So I think Mojave Pistachios is being consistent with their position for,
Sure.
from the
Oh, yeah,
start.
absolutely.
But it'll be interesting to see how the GA responds to
Okay,
it.
right.
And most of that, I'm assuming that I can report back.
Okay, good. Does anyone else in the committee have a question for Stan? Okay, does anyone in the public have a question or a comment on this item? And please identify yourself and so forth. Thank you. Oh,
I don't hear myself. There you
you
go.
go.
Okay. Hope it's not like the city microphones that you have to swallow to talk into. Okay, I'll work it backwards. The letter you just referred to, I have not seen that. I would like to see that. As far as any state entity addressing doing any kind of mediation or whatever, or anything that might have been hoped for in a lawsuit asking for adjudication, I think they probably are going to be powerless in the respect to the one major water user, which is, I guess, the third biggest water user in the valley, which is the base. They're federal, and I seriously doubt they're going to want to take the position of listening to anything, what a state agency is going to tell them what they think they ought to do about water, and what the base ought to do and should have already offered to do was pay their share of fees for water use, just like everybody else. But of course, we all know through history that's not going to happen. They think they don't need to pay for anything, shove it off all onto the district, shove it onto the city, or whatever they want to put it. So that's probably kind of pointless in that respect, because that's one of the big problems that we need to solve in order to get fairness and equity to all the water users in the valley. As far as some of the statements at the meeting, I had forgotten, and Mr. Retora reminded me about whoever it was at the GA talking about we need to look into the water district's fees. My immediate reaction was, well, mind your own business. It's not your business what the water district charged for fees. And it's just, more indicative of their increased, I think, attitude of willing too much power over the water issue in this valley. It's just what happens when people sit on boards that they're not really answerable to anybody. Not elected to their position. They don't owe anything. They can't be voted off. They're just there, and they're going to be there as long as they want to be there because nobody put them in place. That means nobody else can take them down. That's just part of the problem. The other thing that was brought up, and another, button into the water district's business, going to pay their staff, I'm sure, large sums of money to sit down and try to look at numbers and tell the water district how they should go about financing the replenishment fee that they're being at least obligated. They're paying under protest, as I understand. And there again, it's like what's it their business how the water district pays that fee? They mandated the paying of the fee. If I'd been on the water district, I'd have said, tell them to go jump in the lake. We're not paying it. It hadn't been done fairly. They haven't even addressed three potential major sources of water that could easily balance out the water equation in this valley. But water district's paying it, and it's absolutely no business of the GA how they fund it. So I hope obviously they'll bring it up, that I get to our representative in some calmer fashion, tell them to go jump in the lakes, not their business.
One quick note is that one of the reasons for doing a comprehensive adjudication is that will require the Navy to participate. Now, to what level they have to participate is based, on other court cases, but they will be required to participate. So I agree with you. In the past, they've not perhaps participated as perhaps they should have, but we have high hopes that we're going to bring them into the discussion.
Like the rest of us. Thanks.
So Stan, can I get a clarification? You mentioned that the GA chairman asked his staff to look into ways to reduce the water district fees. We're talking about reducing the fees that the water district charges their customers, or reducing the fees that are being levied against the water district by the Groundwater Authority?
The impression that I got was that they were going to look at reducing the fees paid by our ratepayers to us, to the water district.
So, okay, so I'm still not sure. So we have fees that we charge them for Ready to Serve and for the water they use.
He's
And
talking
then we
about
have-
the pass-on fee.
Then
to
we have the
GA.
pass-through
Yeah,
fees.
pass-through.
It's pass-through fees. I'm assuming it was only the pass-through fees
Okay.
that they were concerned about.
Right.
And won't know for sure until this next meeting. Obviously, the easiest way to reduce those pass-through fees is for them to charge us a lower fee.
Okay.
Yeah, but I doubt very seriously if that will be on the forefront of their suggestions.
Right. So that was what I would have assumed as well. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Anything else on item 3? All right, very good. Item 4, brackish water study. Who was standing in today for that?
I have that. We met on July 15th to discuss using the existing funds that are in the brackish water account to make up the difference between what's remaining in the grant and the $69,000 cost that it'll be to sample the 2 wells, the NR1 and NR2, after we did the recent aquifer tests. So that was about $37,000, and the group did agree to make up that difference. And these wells will assist in the modeling performance of a reverse osmosis system, so they want to get sampling from those wells. In addition to that, the third invoice and progress report were uploaded to the grants online system, and the reimbursable amount is $75,129, and all those DocuSign documents were all signed on July 20th. So hopefully that'll get processed soon. That's the entire update for the brackish water study.
Stan, anything? Questions? All right, committee, questions? All right,
You have a
anybody
committee.
who is here in the public or online, any questions? Oh,
Okay.
there you go.
So I've been hearing about this for a while. When is the study going to be completed so people can see the results and look at the data and so forth?
Hopefully soon. We need to get these wells sampled so that they can finish up their analysis of using the water in that particular area for reverse osmosis. So it's just taken some time. Unfortunately, we had some setbacks, but it's moving along. I don't remember off the top of my head when the drop dead date is that needs to be done for the grant funding.
Okay,
But
so,
we did get an extension because of some issues, COVID being one of them, in order to get the work done.
okay, so you mentioned 2 wells. So there's 2 wells they're looking at making use of to extract the brackish water, is that
No,
correct?
they did some aquifer testing out there, and so they want to test the water quality of those particular wells. So those would not be the wells that they would use.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just interested in this because I've heard the numbers quoted as to how much potential water there is, and then that could be a big player in, if you were to successfully make the case, and I'm going to urge that the district does come up with a really good way to make the case that the brackish water ends up evaporating out in the play-in, and that evaporated water is a huge source of lost water, and figuring a way to treat the brackish and keep that from leaving the valley would be a new source of water, and go back on the plus side of the water balance equation of the aquifer. Now, I also remember forwarding a article, and I'm sure there's probably other things coming out, but I saw one somewhere along the way about a different method somebody is looking at. They're using graphite nanofibers to make up the membranes and supposedly be a better way to do the filtering of the salts. I sent it to Stan. I don't know if you got that or not. I'll look that up, and just so you be aware, because that's, it's expensive to treat the brackish water. If there's new ways coming around to make it cheaper, then obviously we'd want to look at that.
Right. Yep. The state has already said in no uncertain terms that they would not consider brackish water to be new water. So we've asked them, and made that suggestion.
As a matter of fact, that's one of the things the board has been requesting is, how does it fit into the water budget? Because if it doesn't fit into the water budget, or provide a benefit based upon the water budget, then like Dave was saying, it's not new water, it's just water. So it's going to be interesting when we see the report, because obviously there's a lot of people who know how to refine brackish water. The question is, how do you make use of it in light of and consistent with Sigma? So I think you're spot on when you're talking about that. But that idea has not been wasted on the board. We've been talking about that for some time.
And there's still use for the brackish water, even if it's not considered new water. You don't want to pump all the potable water out of the area and have the brackish water then flow into where the potable water was. So you can put pressure on the brackish water fields, you can treat it, you can blend it, and avoid cross-contamination. Okay, anything else on item 4? Anybody online who is interested? Nope, I'm getting the no. Very good. Let's move on to item 5, alternate water sources. Okay.
We're going to be discussing that at our
Okay.
workshop.
Right,
So.
but nothing new or exciting in the
and
meantime.
I have nothing new or exciting.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, we can abbreviate the discussion and go on to what the next topic that might be rather extended.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment on item 5? All right, very good. Let's move to item 6, urban water management plan and water shortage contingency plan. Who wants to lead off on this one? Okay, Stan, go ahead.
Okay. I've got a number of comments that I dog-eared, a number of pages. Yeah, on page 1-2, couldn't find anything on 1-1, but 1-2 has future water needs, and in there, they talk about population increases and increase in water use due to population increase. Nowhere in here do I see any input or factor based upon the new state laws, SB 606 and AB 1668. The assumption is that whatever our current water usage is, it's just going to keep going up and up and up and up. And of course, it will go up, but my feeling is that the purpose for the state enacting those laws, even though they're not finalized yet, is for us to be reducing our water usage. And the report makes,
You're wondering how they derive those numbers.
pardon?
So you're really wondering how they derive those numbers? And did they take into account those
Yeah,
laws you
yeah.
quoted?
If they think it isn't going to impact it, then they should say why.
Okay.
My feeling is that it will impact it, but again, I'm not writing the report, but I think it needs a big clarification. The
Stan-
state's wasting a lot of time if we don't actually reduce water.
Stan, is that the summary that you're looking at, like the executive summary
Yes.
part? Okay.
Yes.
They'll probably have more details somewhere else in the,
Well, I looked for that.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I didn't find anything on SB 606 or AB 16.
you may not, because the guidance for the urban water management plan came out some time ago and may not include that, and because nothing's final, they probably aren't going to require that to be in there at this point. They're very specific on what has to be in the report and how you have to make certain calculations and what numbers to use, so,
So that might be a result of, all right, very good, previous
Yeah.
conditions and requirements.
yeah.
So do you have a list of items that you found that you'd like to have clarified?
Well, I can just go through, there's a number of things that, obviously, we do need to clarify that, and if it's a matter of, if the rationale is exactly what was stated, then it needs to be stated that we didn't do it and this is why. Also, on page 3.2, it says that we got the population numbers from Kern Cog. It does not provide a reference document. Neither does it say what actual growth they used in calculating the numbers, like 1% or 2% or 3%. Basically, my concern is that in the past, I've never known Kern Cog to provide anything but Kern County growth rates, which are typically 3 or 4 higher because they're basically Bakersfield growth rates. So I want to make sure that we're using a number that really represents our valley, if we can find one anyway. On page 411, we talk about district projects, and there was no mention of any El Paso exploration, and I thought we had previously agreed that we were going to do exploration in El Paso area, and it doesn't even get, obviously, there's no detail behind it, but there's no mention in here of doing any exploration anywhere. And I'd like to see some meat put behind that.
I don't know that there's an active exploration of the El Paso area, but there's a workshop coming up where I think you could bring that up.
Well, we've discussed it.
I don't know that we've
numerous
taken
times.
action on it, though. Right.
And yeah, the question is how serious do you, I think most of the board is serious. We just haven't put any money behind actually doing it.
Well, we haven't taken any action on it yet, so I wouldn't expect
Right.
Krieger and Stewart to have it in there.
There is on page 417, a listing of wastewater, future wastewater availability, and they reference a city document. And the numbers come from Provost and Pritchard. I would like to see that, that document, which was a July 10, 2021, very recent document, included as an appendix. Let's see.
Oh, while you're looking for your next item, I note in section 4.5, they have established a minimum water for health and sanitation purposes in the event of an emergency of 68 gallons per person per day, which I would like to note is about half again as much as the state thinks is necessary for normal day-to-day operations.
That's in the water shortage
Yeah,
plan, okay.
section 4.5.
Yeah, I had noted that as well. Okay, on page 7, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
on page 7.4, they talk about the district does not anticipate any inconsistency in supply due to legal, environmental, water quality, or climate factors. And again, legal would include, in my mind, anything coming out of the GA or the SB 606, AB 1668. And again, we can't just ignore it. We can exclude it, but I think we need to establish the rationale for why we didn't address those documents or those laws. And also, similarly, on page 7.7, they talk about there are no anticipated water supply constraints based upon climate conditions, anticipated regulatory changes, or other criteria. And even though the state laws are not active, I think it's incorrect to say that we aren't anticipating them to be here. And so that's the total of my comments on the urban plan.
Dan?
Would you want to get comment from the public or want me to go on with the
Renee
shortage?
has something she'd like
I
to
just wanted to
mention.
get a clarification. The laws you're talking about, are that's the ones that limit how much water we can use indoors and outdoors?
Yes.
Okay, but that's not going to limit how much our water supply is. That's what it's addressing, our supply of water, which we're talking about our groundwater.
If indeed the scope is just supply, then I would agree. Then the question is, I guess, where do those laws come in? Because the whole document talks about how much water are we going to use and how much is available. What's the difference and how do we rationalize all of this? So somewhere in the document, there has to be some statement about the regulatory issues associated with the use of water. It may be that I've identified the wrong area.
Okay.
But what I don't want to do is to send something to the state when obviously the people who are going to review this plan know very well those laws are going to be effective very soon. And to not address them at all would seem to be perhaps an oversight.
Okay, so what I'm going to recommend is if you have points that you believe need clarification, if you could
Yes.
email them to Dawn for action. And then he can assign it as he
Yeah.
sees fit. So just a clarification, these documents are available on the Water District website under public documents. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any other comment on the part that we've just discussed? All right, very good. Stan, you have more?
Not on the urban water management plan, but on the critical,
The water
Okay.
shortage contingency
yeah,
plan,
the
which is
water
appendix,
shortage contingency plan.
appendix F.
Yeah. All right, go ahead then.
Okay, on page 4-2, which is and table 4-1, they talk about water rationing may be implemented, and I'm not aware of any ordinance or resolution that maybe if what we should do is document what we mean by water rationing, what's the implementation of that?
Well, there's a number of appendices. I think one of them, one of the appendices has
Oh, yeah,
a long
it
list
might be
of.
in here, and I actually, to be quite honest,
Okay.
I didn't have time to read all 400 pages of appendices.
Yes, there were quite a few.
And so it may be there, but it should be, most of the other stuff there is reference documentation for.
You'd like
and
that
things
referenced
defined.
directly so that it's easy to find.
And so we need to reference whatever we mean by rationing. And if we don't really mean rationing, we should say what we really do mean.
So just for clarification for anybody who may be listening online and for the public,
Yes,
this is talking about rationing in the event of an extreme emergency where more than
yeah.
half of our ability to produce water for our customers is impaired.
Yeah.
A disaster such as an earthquake.
yeah. And it's not something we really expect.
Right.
This is if the absolute worst happened at the absolute worst time, this is what we would do. But, so even though it's not something we expected, we still need to have it clear.
Right.
And by the way, also on this page, even though I don't have it noted here, the words they use here in terms of water use in excess of Tier 2 is considered excessive water is inconsistent with the area that you were identifying earlier.
The 68 gallons per person per day.
Yeah, on page 4-9. And I don't object necessarily to the 68 gallons. It might be the right number. I would like to see the rationale for why the number was picked.
So they do have a page that has an explanation of how they arrived at their figure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it could be a note, down there, but to say that the district has established said minimum quantity as 68 gallons per capita per day means that there was some thought put behind it.
Right, and I think they have an explanation as to how they arrived at that number.
And as long as they do,
Okay.
that is fine. But, and reference the area, go back to, where it came from.
Okay.
And you're right, that is obviously larger than what the sort of baseline for indoor use is.
Right.
Which was 55 and now they may be going to 50, but
So the state intends to restrict people to 55 gallons per person per day, then soon, within a year or two, then drop that down to 50. Other representatives of the state legislature suggesting that 44 gallons per day is more than enough for everybody. The key is that there is no way to enforce this. We cannot go to an individual customer's house and know how many people are in there at any given time. So really, it's going to impact water districts all over the state. It's unenforceable, and the fines are quite expensive.
yeah, and the fines are levied on the water district.
On the water district,
Is
yes, right.
the big issue. It turns out that they identify 3.1 persons per household as the number of people in a single-family residential area. I think we need to say where that came from. And they also identify 2.3 persons per household for
Apartments.
multi-family residential, which again may very well be the case, but where did the number come from?
Okay.
And if asked, can we justify it?
All right.
And then I would like to point out that the numbers on this page provide an allotment, but it doesn't say how that allotment is used. And I couldn't find. Now, I did find in two other pages, on page 4-2, which is the one we were looking at just previously, where they talk about in excess of tier 2, that you're fined, all right? But the other area where they talk about the fines is on page 614, where they also talk about tier 2. But these allotments are 103 cubic feet per year, which equates to 0.28 to 200 cubic feet per day. And the numbers they use on page 4.2 and 614 reference excess of tier 2. Tier 2 represents 2,400 cubic feet per year, and that works out to be, if you use the number that I've previously used of 2.84 persons per household, which may be a weighted average of the 3.1 and the 2.3, I don't know. That comes out to be 208 gallons per person per day. And I don't think anybody would consider that as being a critical mass for water use.
Well, that's more than people are using on per capita average right now, which is something like, what,
Yeah.
134 gallons per person today? Or 39? Okay.
Anyway, and at least I could not figure out the inconsistency between page 410 and pages 4.2 and 614,
Okay.
where one is talking about an allotment, which makes sense, and the other one is talking about an excess of tier 2, but would seem more like something slightly more than tier 1 would be the number we should be using. But the inconsistency between those three sections need to be resolved.
If you have an apparent inconsistency, please do send that to Dawn so we can get it clarified. So just for a moment, speaking of clarification, again, I want to mention to the public and anybody who might be listening that this is talking about ways to encourage people not to use water during a critical emergency. This is not to cover normal operations.
Yes.
Wait, thanks, Dan, go on.
So I think that covers I found some minor typos that I won't bother anybody with.
Send those to
but I-
Dawn too.
Yeah, send those,
Send those to Dawn too.
because we've all proofread it many times, but sometimes little typos will slip by, so.
Yeah, well, in any event, those are, that one I think is a major inconsistency that, it may be explainable, but to the average reader, it needs to make sense. And the top of, the bottom of the transition between tier 2 and tier 3 does not represent any type of a critical water usage. So
Okay, all right. Does
those three areas need to be reviewed and made consistent.
All right. Thank you, Stan. Does anybody on the committee have a comment on this item? Anyone on the public or on the telephone, internet? Have a comment on this one? No, a microphone, please, for Mike.
Hear me now? Okay.
Mr. Neal, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, we got water management plan on here, and I know this is, something that people probably don't like to go down this road under the conditions that we're in right now. But, you know, we got, huge, highly expensive replenishment fees being charged to us. And that's based on, you know, what the water balance is claimed to be in the aquifer. And of course, the water district's a big player in the pumping out of the aquifer. Now, let's just assume an extreme scenario here, just for purposes of making the point. Assume you had 1,000 people all of a sudden influx into the valley. Now your water use goes way, way up, and now all the replenishment fee that the water district would have to pay would be tremendous. Has there been any consideration during the formation of this plan to, I guess, come up with a method for saying, well, here we are right now at this point in time, we have, you know, this much population in town, where we're already paying replenishment fees to the tune of, you know, whatever it is, I think it's 2,500 acre feet, so forth, somewhere around that, to charge people, basically just charge new residences / businesses that come into town and add to the pumping that required out of the aquifer for their use, charge them a whole lot more for water, and make it so that, you know, everybody else in the valley, obviously, if you didn't do that, then everybody else in the valley would just burden the cost, share all the burden cost of those, you know, replenishment fees that are not, it's not cheap at all. And as it is right now, people are waking up and they're looking at their water district bill and they're looking at the line items going, golly, I'm paying this much for the, you know, groundwater fee. Well, they're only going to complain more and more in a scenario like that. And I don't realistically look for that to be the case, seeing as how the population in the valley has been fairly stable for some time. But, you know, if you're going to have a complete plan, then some kind of thinking towards something along those lines ought to be part of it. Or, you know, unless, I don't know how often this is updated. How often is this updated?
Every 5 years.
Okay.
Every
well,
5 years.
Yeah, I would think maybe a review, in light of the current situation, overall water situation in the valley, I would think at least some kind of cursory review of it sooner than every 5 years ought to be done. And some kind of thinking about what, you know, what I'm talking about, which is kind of nebulous at this point. It could be fleshed out pretty readily, should be thought about in this water management plan.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Just a quick response on one aspect is I think our lawyer has looked at the issue of trying to charge more for people that are coming in that are forcing our water use above some established level. And it turns out Prop 218 is pretty clear. You cannot charge people based upon a class. And that's pretty much just not going to be a starter. I mean, we've got to do something, but it's not going to be that.
We're going to have to tackle the issue differently.
Yes.
Right. Okay, anything else on item 6? Then let's go to item 7, future agenda items. Does anyone have a future agenda item? Okay, nothing from the committee. All right, then hearing nothing else, so then I'll go and call for adjournment at 2:44 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for coming.